Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to another session of Leveraging Leadership. My name is Kellen Adams. Today I'm here with Dr. Debbie Mercer. She is currently the Dean at the College of Education at Kansas State University. Dr. Mercer, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Begin today telling us a little bit about yourself, really your role currently, as well as the path that led you from your college degree to the higher ed ranks.
Well, my path was not linear. Started out as a preschool teacher with my initial bachelor's degree. Went back and earned licensure as an elementary teacher and taught kindergarten for 8 years, and also served as the library media specialist in a small rural Kansas school. Added my master's degree, and then culminated with that terminal doctorate degree in education with an emphasis in reading and English as a second language. And then taught at the university level for a number of years, helping prepare teachers to be elementary educators. And then stepped into administration at the higher education level. So I'm in my second deanship at Kansas State, and back at my alma mater. So it's a wonderful place to be.
Excellent. Always good to be back at your alma mater.
It is. I love purple, and I truly believe in the mission of Kansas State. So the first operational land-grant institution in the United States, very much focused on access and bettering people's lives, and education absolutely mirrors that mission.
You mentioned 2 deanships. Your other was at Fort Hays, if I'm not mistaken?
You are correct. It was. Yes. Was at Fort Hays for 5 years as dean.
Tell us a little bit more about Kansas State. You mentioned the land grant as well as the College of Education. What do you view your mission as? Why do people want to come to work at Kansas State and specifically in the College of Ed?
So the College of Education has a very unique culture. In fact, when I was interviewing to go back to K-State, and I say back as an employee, not as a student, I was told, our faculty all get along. And I thought, of course, that's what you say when you're recruiting someone in, right? We get along. And yet, I've found that to be absolutely the truth. So it doesn't mean that we agree. It doesn't mean that we don't have some philosophical differences, but it means we have a culture where people respect those differences, and you can put those thoughts and ideas on the table. So very much diversity of thought is appreciated, and that culture is important to me. So as a college, we have about 2,500 students. We're fairly evenly divided, undergraduate and graduate. We have initial licensure programs, of course, at the undergraduate level in elementary and a variety of secondary education fields. And then at the graduate level, we have a Master of Arts in Teaching, again, leading to an initial license, elementary or select secondary content fields. And then a variety of other graduate programs. So school counselors, principals, superintendents, reading specialists, English as a second language, and then some adult education programming as well.
Excellent. You talked a little bit about culture. I'd like to expand upon that here in a little bit, but let's go back to another point you made, which was that diversity of thought. How many staff members do you have? Talk a little bit about that diversity of thought and how that comes to coalesce in your college.
So total overall, about 200 employees in the College of Education, and we have a variety of faculty paths. So there's the traditional tenure track faculty member. That faculty member is engaged in teaching, research, and service. And then we also have teaching faculty, and their sole job is teaching and service. So different tracks, and thus different sets of responsibilities and different perspectives that are brought to the table. So that research faculty member that's heavily engaged in research is then informing practice, right? They're establishing what is best practice for student learning, what is best practice for managing a classroom, et cetera. Our teaching faculty are those straight out of the classroom. So they can say, last year with my 4th graders, here's what worked. So they bring that relevancy and that immediacy to our program. And I think that balance is very important. So diversity of thought. I mentioned research agendas, and each faculty member has their own research agenda. The real power, I believe, starts to happen when those research agendas intersect. So one faculty member might really be focused on dyslexia and how do we help students learn to read. And then that intersects with someone in special education and someone in a building leadership program saying, as the instructional leader in my building, this is an important issue and I want to know more about it. So then those three faculty members can start to work together. And I think, again, that's where real power happens.
Great. Thank you for sharing about your staff. I'd like to talk about your role that you play in the educational realm of Kansas. You're right now sitting in one of 286 school districts in the state of Kansas. So let's talk about it at the macro level. What do you believe are the strengths currently for Kansas and specifically the education profession and our educators that we have here? What do you think we're really known for? What are our strengths?
So we're at a crossroads, right? Not just in Kansas, but in the nation, in the world, in education right now. So what we were asked to do a few months ago, completely unparalleled in our history. And yet one of the strengths we had in Kansas specifically was the ownership and leadership we have at the teacher level. So if you think about what our commissioner did at that time, it wasn't, let me sit in my office and craft a plan by myself, but it was, how can I bring Kansas educators to the table quickly, efficiently, because we have work to do and we need their voices. So I think a strength that we have in Kansas is the valuing of teachers, the valuing of teacher leadership, and then empowering that to occur. So the documents that were produced by the State Department to help all 286 districts and all accredited private schools as well wasn't crafted by one individual commissioner. It was crafted by Kansas educators. And I think we have a history of that in Kansas. And I think that's become our culture. And when it's part of your culture, then you demand it. And I think teachers expect to be at the table in crafting important policy as we move forward. So what we found during this pandemic, and we've learned a great deal, right? There were some teachers that were ready to seamlessly move to online instruction. And there were some teachers that needed a lot of support to be able to make that happen. And we could parallel that with students. There were students that didn't miss a beat. In fact, we have students that have thrived in an online environment. And we have students that we haven't heard from. And so we have the continuum that we really have to think about as we move forward. Because I don't believe school's ever going to go back exactly like it was, right? You don't come through something like what we're in the middle of right now and return to what was. And so I think one of the exciting things about education and what I tell students that are contemplating a career in education is, we need you right now. We need your perspective because things are going to change. And I've been in education long enough that I really have to fight to be out of that box of what I think is best and think about what's best for students of today, right? What should we look like in the future? So we're turning a huge ship. So if you think about the history of schools, we had that one-room schoolhouse, right? My grandma taught in a one-room schoolhouse in Riley County. Multiple ages, everyone working on something different, and it was an orchestration of learning across content and across ages. And then we moved into what we have now. Carnegie classification, right? Time and content. You go to English language arts from 8 to 9, a bell rings or a gong sounds or there's some magic, and you go to math from 9 to 10. What's next, right? What's next? And that's what we get to define right now. So that's exciting. That's a reason to go into the profession is, okay, what does that look like? So I had the opportunity to visit a number of high schools in Finland and Sweden. And the culture within those buildings was very unique because students were so empowered. And they knew I need a little more support in English language arts. And so they might be there for a larger part of their day, but they had such opportunity and such freedom to go to where they felt like they really needed support and needed to learn. So I like that, again, intersectionality of a day that isn't so compartmentalized. This is biology, and that's all we're going to talk about from 1 to 2 o'clock.
Absolutely.
So what does the future look like? That's that visioning element, right?
Yep, it is. You mentioned teacher leadership as one of our strengths. I certainly would resonate with that point. We have seen that specifically here in Chanute, the number of teachers that have stepped up as we've gone through, not just since March, but generally speaking. So teacher leadership, I think, is a great point. Do we have any challenges? I think the answer is yes. You've likely seen a few. So what do you believe are some of the current challenges our state and or nation are facing with regard to the profession of education?
So I had a team of researchers come together and put together a survey that went out. 800 Kansas teachers filled that out. We've completed the white paper. It's on our website. But that question was asked of those 800 educators. What challenges are we facing? And really help us delve into those. So there were a number of challenges, as you might imagine. At the student level, there were challenges related to their social emotional health, and they weren't in school. They were home. Children felt isolated. We had children that weren't in safe places, and then that weighed heavy on their teachers, worrying about those children. We had nutritional needs, and many districts stepped up to, here's how we're going to disseminate lunches to students in a way that they can access them. We had technology needs, whether that was a device. I don't have a device to be able to access my schoolwork, or I don't have access to stable internet, or there are so many people in my family trying to access our one internet account, it's kicking me off, or I have to share our one computer. So at the student level, those were some things that came out. At the teacher level, some challenges that I thought were really key weren't so much related to the technology. It was, or access to the technology. It was more focused on how do I best harness this technology to be able to accomplish what I need to accomplish as an educator, and make sure that my students are learning in the most effective and I'll say enjoyable way possible. Sure. Right? We didn't want rote worksheets on an iPad. How do we really interact with students and have rich discussions when we have this Zoom page and I have 25 postage size stamp pictures in front of me, right? So how do we best use the technology that we have? And I think that's an open field for us as we move forward. So we have some great learning management systems that help us organize, but really focusing on the rich interaction, I think, is an area of emphasis for the future. Teachers also expressed in this survey some things that were very concerning to me about food insecurities. We don't necessarily think about a teacher that has a regular income having food insecurities, but that was expressed. Finances are spread so tight, a single wage earner in the family or other wage earners had lost their jobs. And the increase of domestic violence that teachers were dealing with in their own homes. So teachers talked a lot about their own social emotional health and the pressures of worrying about students, but then those personal pressures of finances and relationships within their own homes. So those were some of the challenges that came out from that very broad-based survey that was conducted.
I like how you went to directly the stakeholders that are involved. You said 800 teachers responded. Not sure what percent that amounts to in the state of Kansas, but nonetheless, that is a very good sample size. So you mentioned that teacher leadership is one of our strengths, and you went right back to that same strength to garner their input regarding where we go from here.
Absolutely. So if I articulated one criticism of higher education, it could be that we're removed, right? The ivory tower,
Yes.
you're right. And it's true, it's been a long time since I was the teacher of record in a classroom completely responsible for that. And so when you recognize that, you search out ways to compensate for that, right? So it's hiring those people straight out of a classroom to, come in and help support our curriculum and help support our field experiences. And then exactly like the survey did, going directly to them saying, we need to hear from you. We need to learn together.
That's excellent that you've realized and recognized that. Let's shift a little bit, talk about your office in the ivory tower. Let's talk about your leadership beliefs. A frequent topic on this show and in general for me is culture. You referenced that earlier. How do you go about building the culture with, I believe, around 200 employees in a college that is so diverse? What do you do to install that culture and or cultivate it? And what do you believe your role is as the leader of the college?
So I laughed initially because anyone that's been on Kansas State University's campus and in Bluemont Hall, and specifically in my office, knows I don't have a window. We often say the beauty is within the building, right? So setting the culture is important, and there are some things that help make that strong and carry forward from leader to leader to leader. So my successor was someone that really helped set up the structure within the college to allow for input. And leadership is not a solitary activity, right? I firmly believe that. Leadership takes participation. And processes and policies help ensure that that happens and that that's such a part of the institution that it transcends leadership changes and transitions, which are going to occur. So my faculty meet together once a month, and those meetings are very well attended. And I don't run that meeting. My faculty run those meetings. So there's someone elected from the faculty that serves in that role. And the vast majority of the meeting is work that has come up through a set of committees. And then that's discussed and voted on by the entire college. I'm there at their invitation, and I have my report. I share what's going on at each of those meetings, but it's not Debbie Mercer running the meeting, right? So that's part of establishing a culture, is what practices, what systems do you have in place? So that's one example. From a cultural standpoint, we cannot tell people that they're doing a good job enough. So we have policies, procedures in place for remediation, whether we're talking for a student or a faculty member, right? We're quick to say we need a support plan in place. But if we look at the other side of that, our gifted students, our faculty that are going above and beyond, our faculty that are researching and surveying and interviewing 800 plus teachers, right? They need to be recognized. And so I use that time in front of all my faculty to help acknowledge those that are doing a great job. So we've seen this happen at the classroom level. The teacher that compliments and authentically rewards positive behavior and good work, we see that have a spillover effect, and students start doing that to each other, and they start encouraging themselves. We see that in the microcosm of a kindergarten classroom, of a 12th grade classroom. That same thing can happen within the workplace. So there are times that as superintendent of schools, you have to put the responsibility on your shoulders of this is the decision, right? Likewise, I have to do that as well. But if you make that the exception rather than the rule, and then you explain, here's what I had to do and here's why, you're still building that culture and that participation of people being in the know, people understanding, and all moving forward together.
So you don't believe in every decision needs to come through you?
Oh my. How many decisions are made at the teacher level in a classroom, right? There's research around that. It's hundreds of decisions every single day. There is no way you and I can make every single decision that needs to be made to make sure our educational organization is moving forward. So no, I do not believe I need to make every decision.
That's excellent. I share in that sentiment as well.
I always tell my faculty, though, don't surprise me. If there's anything that you think I might need to know, let me know, because that way we're moving forward together. And
that right there promotes that open line of communication, and I assume that's a two-way street, like we try to promote here. What I pulled out was voice, recognition, and encouragement seem to be kind of the three tenets of your cultural beliefs. So excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We talked a little bit earlier about teacher leadership. I assume you want that in your college just like we want it here at the halls of Chanute High School. So what are you doing, what's your staff doing to build that teacher capacity, that teacher leadership in the College of Ed? What could we learn at the K-12 level that you're doing that's successful?
So again, systems, processes in place, recognition of moving from an assistant professor to an associate professor to a full professor, much like a teacher might move to a department head. That type of title recognition is one way. But I think that very powerful leadership occurs in an informal manner. It's the teacher that we know, if I have a question about technology, I know who to go to. And it might be the technology teacher, but it might be that fifth grade teacher that's rocking it, doing just some phenomenal things, right? I have a student and I'm not real sure how to manage this behavior, or I'm not sure how to engage my family at home. Oh, but I know so-and-so down the hall has done a great job. So those reputations are ways of teacher leadership, right? That's what that is recognizing that skill set, that knowledge, and being a go-to person, because we know they're going to help us and move us to a better decision to resolve the issue that we have in front of us. So likewise, I encourage that with my faculty. That can happen formally through a committee structure, and that can happen very informally through those hallway conversations or those, do you have a quick minute? I have a question for you. But you want to provide opportunities and then really encourage that relationship building. So we're all busy, and the pandemic has thrown some things into a different way of thinking and doing. But those opportunities to be together without formal agendas are so important. So I host a holiday party. We don't talk work. It's not about work. It's about how are your kids doing, and what are your upcoming plans for the holidays. It's conversation that is outside of work. And I found that those types of interaction opportunities allow us to get to know each other on a personal level. And if you know someone's story, whether that's the third grader sitting in front of you or your colleague across the table, you provide so much more grace if you know their story. And so you need opportunities for those dialogues to happen and those relationships to build.
Excellent. So again, what I'm hearing is we have to create these experts in the buildings, right? Or in a department or in a hallway. So you don't think the principal's the only expert in the school building?
I think the principal is one expert in this school building. I think if the principal is the only expert, oh my, what weight on her shoulders, right? Yes. So how do we develop those teacher leaders, right? And that can come from a principal, from a superintendent, from another instructional leader in the district, because it may be that some professional development needs to happen. And so that's where we send somebody to a conference or to take a course or whatever that might be so that they gain knowledge. But they come back and share it then with all their peers. Maybe not even just in that building, but if it's something that is particularly relevant at pick a grade level, fourth graders, because this is tied to their standards, well, then that teacher can then be a leader among the elementary buildings in the district, not just in their microcosm of their individual building. But there have to be structures in place to allow that to happen, because as the fourth grade teacher, I'm not going to go knock on the elementary building on the other side of town and say, I have something that I really think you should know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So the informal and the formal structures are both important.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing the structural components. I think that's huge. When systems lack those processes and those formal structures, we leave it, if you will, to the culture that is either there or not there, right, to take over. So my opinion, my belief, and maybe you share this, maybe you don't, is that you can drive the culture by what you ultimately allow or do not allow.
Absolutely. Every yes and every no contributes.
Excellent. Shift a little bit. My second favorite topic is core values.
Okay.
I think that most people probably know them in their heart. I'm not sure how many regularly articulate them to an external audience or otherwise, but I'd like to hear today, what are Dr. Debbie Mercer's core values? What are your fundamental beliefs that lead you in your leadership?
So I'll try to take that on two levels, and I'll start with the college level. So most organizations have a mission statement, right? Ours is to prepare knowledgeable and ethical and caring decision makers for a diverse and global world. Those words kind of roll off of our tongue, right? We have them painted in the commons area, and they're on syllabi, and we use those words. But what does that look like in action, right? And that drills us down. So everyone knows K-State are the Wildcats, and education we're the EdCats, and that's a mnemonic that is widely articulated throughout our college. But we use that to create an acronym of what are those core values. What do we think as a faculty are so important, and what's our promise to students that come to our College of Education? So exceptional experience. Second to none. We want study abroad experiences. We want diverse field experience, and we really go into what does that look like in our curriculum. D is a dedicated faculty. What are the qualifications of faculty that we would put in front of a group of students preparing to be an educator? C is connected community. How do we connect and provide those opportunities for students to connect with each other and to connect with our faculty? A is advocates for all. And so that's easy to say, but what does that look like? And what are you learning in our program that ensures that the teachers coming out of Kansas State University's College of Education are true advocates for students, regardless of fill in whatever word you want to fill in there, right? T is technology. And so we talked about technology, and it's been important for years. The pandemic has soared it to an absolute top priority, but it's beyond knowing one device or one program, and when and where and how do you best use technology to enhance learning. And then S is student-centered, because if every decision we make isn't for our students, then we've missed our mark. And so we take each one of those and further expand on those as we talk about what's important in our College of Education. And I think I could take all of those and transpose them personally into what I think is important, right? So I would start with an overarching core value of being a good listener, because I believe if you're not a good listener, you're not a good learner, because you're too busy doing all the talking, right? And so we need to know, what are our students thinking and feeling? What are our faculty thinking and feeling? What is our community and our business leaders thinking and feeling, to inform our decision making? And so listening is absolutely key. We have to lead from our heart, right? So if students aren't what's important to us, we've missed the mark. If our teachers aren't what's important to us, we've missed the mark. If bettering our community and our world isn't what's important to us, we've missed the mark. And so that heart is we're taking care of social emotional needs of our students and of our faculty. And I'm sure you're seeing, just like I'm seeing, our faculty are spread thin. Our teachers are putting everything they have onto the table, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting work. And so that heart is so important. And then the final kind of core value is we have to be bold. If you're in this profession to maintain the status quo, we've missed too much. And so if you're a good listener and you're coming from the heart, you're willing to take those calculated risks that are going to move your organization and thus your faculty and your students forward. And so we've taken some of those risks, and they've played out for us so very well. But we need bold leadership right now.
Excellent. Listening, leading from that heart, which really goes back to what you believe in or what you stand for, and then finally being bold about making the decisions and forging ahead. Thank you so much. You talked about vision a little bit ago. I want to hear about that a little bit more. How do you go about articulating that vision that you have for the College of Education? What can we be doing better at the K-12 level in our vision? But just talk to the audience a bit about this important leadership concept known as vision.
So vision is so critical, right? It sets the path for where you're moving as an organization. So strategic planning helps move that vision forward, but it's what do you really want to be? What do you want to be known as? And so if I back up and use another Commissioner Watson example, we have embarked as a state on this redesign initiative, and it's not without controversy. We acknowledge that, but the foundation for that strategic plan and moving Kansas forward came from conversations throughout our state from not tens of people or hundreds of people, but thousands of people. And Kansas State helped analyze those over 2,000 pieces of qualitative data that came from those conversations. What do you want out of a successful 24-year-old Kansan, right? So that strategic planning, that data gathering, that data analysis helped lead to the vision and how do we change education. So we could say the pandemic has moved us forward 10 years, maybe 20 years with some of those conversations. We're doing things that we said a year ago, we're not sure that those things can be done, right? So you never waste a good crisis. And I think educators have stepped to that. But as I think about personal vision and vision for the College of Education, I come back to those three core values that I just articulated for you. And we have to be preparing teachers that are going to come to you and do those things that we think are important for the future of teaching and learning. We have to have teachers that understand and know how to use technology. We have to have teachers that are advocates for all students and helping address those learning needs. We have to have teachers that are dedicated. And so if our curriculum isn't producing that type of educator, we've then sent someone to you that's going to be overwhelmed and isn't going to stay in the profession. And we've just invested 4 years in their education. They have invested 4 years in their education. You have hired them. That comes at time and expense. We don't want to lose them after year 2 or after year 3. We want them to be a lifelong educator. And so that's kind of a wrap up, the circular part of a vision. You can say we want professional educators that are impacting students, but all of those incremental steps have to be in place so that we have that powerful teacher in every classroom.
Absolutely. We are after, I think, the same thing. We want those lifelong educators that get here and are able to thrive. We lean heavily on higher ed to send us prepared graduates. So with that, let's talk about student success. Whether it's at your level or ours, it doesn't really matter. What do you believe are those core components of a successful student success, and what can or should we be doing to cultivate and motivate them?
Right. So it's so often in education when that question's asked, it's, well, someone needs to be a strong reader and they need to be able to mathematically compute numbers and they need to have some scientific inquiry in their background. And yet if we think about those 2,000 Kansas voices, what they were saying is, we need students with grit and determination. We need students with work ethic. We need students that can collaborate and work together. So if we take those two that could seem like they're on opposite ends of the continuum and bring them together, boy, again, that intersectionality, that's where the power happens, right? And so if I'm not in English language arts from 8 to 9, but if I'm expected to read and write in my biology class as I'm studying the water quality in my community, or as Cadence and I left to drive down here today and the parking around Manhattan High School was just an absolute zoo, that's a problem high school kids can take on, right? Yes. Let's put that in front of them. How do we need to change traffic flow so that there's not a standstill in front of our building for, so long every morning? So that's that relevancy, and that is something I don't think we can underscore enough, because you and I have sat in professional development, in college classes, in high school classes, and thought, what in the world does this have to do with me? Yep. And as an educator, if we can't articulate to students why what they're learning is important, it's short term, how do I get through this test, or how do I get through this assignment, and it's off to the side. And then those students start to disengage because it's not relevant to me, right? So I'll use Cadence as another example. She's into horses. That's her passion. I'm sure the rest of her life, horses are going to be part of what she lives and breathes and does. But up until 6th grade, I'm not sure that she ever once had a teacher that said the word horse in class. But couldn't we set up assignments and projects that meet the objectives that we want to meet without mandating a specific topic? So you officiated football for years. You take on football as your topic, and you want a barrel race, you take on horses as your topic, and you have aspirations of being the next NASCAR winner. Well, you better understand how a car functions and operates, and so you take on that. But everybody needs to write about this or prepare a presentation about this. So as we move into those projects that allow students choice, yes, learning soars, right? Because it's relevant, it's important. I can't wait to get to school because I get to do something that's important to me.
So again, student voice, student choice comes back up as what I believe is a common theme to today's conversation. Relevance. I would not be interested at all in anything with NASCAR. That would turn me off. But like you said, if it did have football embedded in it, now all of a sudden my interest level is way up.
Absolutely.
Excellent points. Final takeaway here. I'm going to give you a tough one.
Shoot.
Talk about the relationship between higher ed and K-12. What is that relationship like? I just want you to be completely candid right now with us. What do you view our strengths? What do you view your strengths? Where are the weaknesses at? But let's talk about that relationship. Let's just get that out in the open right now.
Absolutely. Well, the relationship's absolutely critical, right? I cannot prepare teachers in the ivory tower that are going to be what you need. So I think we have a mutual need of each other. We're your pipeline for teachers, and yet you're the real life day-to-day experiences that need to be provided to our students outside the textbook learning that they are doing. So Kansas State had one of the very first professional development school partnerships in the nation, and that was that early recognition 35 years ago that we needed to work closely with our school partners to really most effectively prepare teachers. So the strengths we have are that those research agendas and that research that faculty are doing, that can make an impact in the classroom. And the strength you have is we're walking it every day. We have children in front of us, and this isn't working. Okay, so what is working? So we have faculty that are working one-on-one and with small groups of teachers. What will work best?
Sure.
We did professional development with an entire building a year ago that was so powerful. And instead of 600 people going to the gymnasium and hearing a phenomenal guru speak while they're making their grocery list in the back, not that I would ever know anything about such activity, each teacher had to pick their own. Where do you want to learn and grow, and what's important to you? And then let's move forward in that direction. So each teacher, either individually or with a small group, picked their own topic of professional learning and move forward. So the physical education teacher had family fitness nights. Another teacher was learning Spanish because that was important for her to better communicate with her faculty or her families. Someone else was doing a book study around a particular topic. So someone created an outdoor classroom. So all these different things were going on instead of, because you can't keep adding to teachers, right? We have to give something back. But that was a great collaboration between our faculty and their faculty. They could say, here are the types of resources I need. We could say, we have time in our workload of research to go find that information, and we'll come back and talk about it. And so I think that there are even more powerful ways that we need to discover of working together.
Sure.
We're after the same thing, right?
I do think we're after the same thing. I would agree with you there. Are we at odds? Is there a conflict there? Do we understand each other? Those are some of the questions that have come to my mind recently. I do believe in the heart of hearts that both institutions at the macro level are after the same thing.
An outstanding teacher in front of children, with children, impacting learning in powerful ways, right? And so part of what you're alluding to may come from the need to better understand some of the constraints we have, right, related to accreditation. And most institutions in Kansas, at least, and I believe we have 25 that prepare elementary teachers, so a large number of institutions. We have national accrediting standards, and then we have State of Kansas program review. And so I think some of the challenge comes from you coming to me saying, Debbie, this person's going to be a great teacher. My gut tells me that. I know it. Here are things I've seen as they've worked as a para. What's the fastest route to get them to licensure? Sure. And I'm saying, just a second, Dr. Adams. Here are the courses that we assured the state of Kansas all of our candidates would take, and I can't sign off on a recommendation for licensure until there's been a classroom management course or until there's been a reading methods course, even though this person has some great background knowledge working in those areas. So I think what higher ed has done, and we have some great examples in our state of I almost hate to use the word alternative programs because there's a negative connotation to that, but a program outside the Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9:30, you will be in Manhattan, Kansas, in Bluemont Hall taking this class, right? There's other ways of delivering instruction, and our instruction doesn't have to be, here is reading methods and it's in this encapsulated course for 3 hours, and then you're going to move on to something else. And so our program is starting to mesh and mold at the undergraduate level to more closely match what our principal and district leadership academies have been doing for years, right? And so if we have a leadership academy with Gary County Schools, we're not doing arbitrary finance budget discussions that were written up as a case study from a nondescript school. We're using Gary County data and numbers, and they're delving into that. Relevance. And the courses aren't isolated because budget transcends everything, right? It impacts curriculum, it impacts deferred maintenance, it impacts new building, it impacts acquisition of buildings to further vision and goals. And so much more intertwined and interconnected. And our program at the undergraduate level is doing that now as well, and I think that's very, very powerful. So our Master of Arts in Teaching is a good example of that. I had a bachelor's degree. The only way I could become licensed as an elementary teacher was to go back through an entire bachelor's program, and so I took World Regional Geography 100 because I didn't have something that would check that box, right? And then had to go through all the courses, all the requirements for the elementary ed degree to be recommended for license. Well, that's ridiculous, right? That's no recognition of the strengths that I brought to the table. And so our Master of Arts program provides that avenue for that person with a bachelor's degree that wants to move forward, so they don't have to be in World Regional Geography. Not that I'm not dissing any geography teacher at any level, but I'm saying relevancy, what's most important.
Absolutely. So that collaboration is necessary, but maybe what's lacking right now is a thorough understanding of the other institution, the other entity, and their challenges and what they're going through.
Both ways, right? So I've talked about some of the constraints we have with accreditation and with licensure, but likewise, as a superintendent, you have a 5th grade classroom with 25 students. You have to have a teacher. You advertise and you have 0 people apply. Now, I don't know that you've been in that situation, but your colleagues, your peers across the state of Kansas have been.
Several districts have.
What do you do? Yes. And we have to recognize that and be able to provide some flexibility, both from the higher ed level as well as the state level, to say we have to do something to address this, right?
Yep.
And so we've had a couple of pilot programs. We've participated in some of those programs. The state has analyzed data. We have one for special ed that's going to continue. They're looping back for elementary. And elementary is a growing area of need, right? So we've talked about math, science, and English language arts for years, areas of need. Special education, we know, is number one and has been longitudinally. But elementary, when I graduated, and I'm not ancient, right? When I graduated from K-State, the largest preparation program in the state of Kansas, I was told, Debbie, take the first position that's offered to you because the competition is so intense. And that's true. Maybe there was 100 people applying for that one position.
Wow.
Now, elementary is number 2 in area of need, only behind special education. The world has changed. The world has changed. So, another point of collaboration is teachers in classrooms need to pick out those kids that are the best helpers and the ones that have a great grasp of the content and say, you would be a great teacher. Because if what we say to that student is, oh, good grief, don't ever go into education. The grading is awful. Dealing with the parents is awful. You know, we lay out all the challenges that our position has. You need to go into something else. We've now just charted their path another direction because parents and teachers are the most influential factors in what a student chooses to do after high school. So high school teachers have such a responsibility to say, boy, I loved how you were helping your friend today. You would be a great teacher. You've just planted that seed.
It's an excellent reminder for our teachers regarding the huge influence that they do have.
Huge.
A lot of good takeaways today. I want to thank you, as you said, one of the 25 institutions, correct me if I'm wrong, in the state that's doing teacher preparation and otherwise. Thank you for what you're doing for the profession of education. Thank you for your work here at Kansas State. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Kellen Adams with Leveraging Leadership. Have a wonderful week.